right? Yeah, according to the cloud. I never remembered about it, but it's one of the leading PR and communication companies in Israel. I'm sorry, I'm just meanwhile admitting people to the session. They work with some of the top Israeli companies in Israel, Mamash unicorns, I would say. And I think Daphne comes from a background, she's worked with CNN, ABC, she's won awards, and I think that you can give us a lot of insight on the world of PR, especially for startups as well. And I'm gonna tell you a little bit about, actually I'm gonna let Mike tell you about the session, but I want everyone to introduce themselves, and let's start. I'm gonna go one by one because I think it's easier that way. Amil, capitalize, give us a quick sentence.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
But you cannot see me. Okay, now you can see me. Okay, hi. So we are a StageOne company, and we develop a platform that enable any trader to create automation for his trading and analysis for his trading using natural language.
Very cool.
In short.
In short. Okay, Barak, you're next.
Hey everyone, so my name is Barak. Actually, I'm new here in the neighborhood, and I'm one of the co-founders of Frontitude. And Frontitude helps companies to manage their products micro-copy and also to keep a consistent voice in their products.
Micro-copy. Okay, somebody just reached out to me today with a company like that. We didn't take them on, but oh god, Anyword? Is that a company in the space? Anyword, Kiwi? Maybe.
No, I don't think they're around the same. I think maybe the Kiwi, I think it's in the ads or marketing, maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Elad Titi.
Hey.
מה שלך?
So I'm the CEO of Neuroblade. We build a solution to speed up data-intensive workloads like AI, data analytics. We build the silicon, the hardware, the software.
Whoa!
Yeah, so
great time for you guys.
Yeah, it's a crowded space these days with high valuations. So
high valuations.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Nir Laznik.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nir. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Cedric, and we've built an AI risk management platform for B2C financial services.
Cool.
Thank you. Shira.
Hi. Sorry the video is off. I'm driving. But I'm the VP marketing for Verada. We develop a data infrastructure platform that accelerates queries directly on the customer's data lake. And we do that through unique indexing technology.
Very cool.
Eyal Peleg.
Eyal is my co-founder. He's the CEO.
Right, but I didn't see him, so that's settled. Sorry, let me just admit David. Okay, Eyal, Jody.
Hi, my name is Jody. I'm with Autonomo, and we have a vehicle data platform and marketplace.
Love Autonomo. Love Ben.
Ben is great. We love Ben too.
Naomi, Akil, one of you guys?
Sure, I'll go. I'm sorry. Oh, go ahead.
Naomi, go.
Oh, okay. I'm Naomi. I head marketing at Cover. Cover is a cyber risk modeling platform, and we started with allowing insurers and reinsurers to quantify and understand the risk in their insurance portfolios. And we've recently launched an enterprise cyber risk quantification solution as well.
Very cool. What space?
Tamar?
Hi. So I'm Tamar from Minerva Labs. We are a cybersecurity startup. Our solution aims to prevent attacks before they even start at their organization. That's all. I'm the head of operations and business development.
Okay, thank you. Nir Dovrat.
Hi guys, Nir Dovrat
Hi, Anya.
from CandyTech. We help people to see we help the companies to see the people behind the resume using job simulation and bring on site, evaluate way more candidates, bring on site only the qualified candidates, sparing time, money, and getting better employees eventually.
Wow. Very cool.
And last, Alona.
Hey everyone, I'm Alona from Deep Coding, and Deep Coding is an AI-powered ITSM optimization platform, and we help enterprise IT leaders to automate their workflow and optimize their ITSM operation.
Great. I think I didn't miss anyone, right? Have I missed anyone?
You've missed me, but no worries.
I'm sorry. Guys, introduce yourself. Sorry.
So I'm Shachar. I'm the co-founder with Amir at Capitalize.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so great. It's great to have you guys. As you can see, Mike, everyone is very deep tech oriented, and that's good that you guys deal with technology and innovation. So I'm going to I'll give you a thing. We usually do these workshops. If anyone has questions in the middle, feel free to ask. If you want to wait till the end, and I'm recording this, so I'll send this to you afterwards as well.
It's good to know you're recording. I didn't want to be quotable. Portfolio companies. Okay, ours, not yours.
Don't worry, we'll share it before with you.
All good. So I guess yeah, we'll introduce ourselves quickly and jump into. If you allow us to share screen, we'll.
I think you can share. No, I'm gonna make. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna make you a co-host.
Okay.
Yeah, now you can share. Sorry.
This is it. You guys see it?
Yep.
You see the screen? Beautiful. So, guys, this is very strange. I can't see. You guys see the screen?
Yeah, we see the screen. Thank you.
So yeah, Daphne and I are 2/3 of the co-founding team of Headline Media. We are a PR firm that's based here in Tel Aviv. I believe we're the largest of our kind in Israel. So it's about a 40-odd person team, which is a relatively sizable team. We've been at it for 10 years. So we built up a pretty good reputation. Essentially, none of us, a lot of this presentation, and actually the presentation I gave originally at the StageOne event in the restaurant a couple of years ago was why you shouldn't hire PR and why you're not ready to hire PR. So most of the presentations, I think Tal was very taken by the fact that, we tend to shit on the industry. Daphne, John, and I actually don't come from PR backgrounds. We are ex-journalists, so we take a perverse pride in the fact that we don't come from the industry, and we kind of built this from our gut. And the the kind of the North Star was, let's look for stories we would cover as journalists. Pretty simple. And with the premise being, if it's a good story, odds are you'll get coverage because PR isn't brain surgery, and we're going to do a lot about PR not being that difficult today. If it's a good story and you work hard, you're going to get coverage. You're going to have happy clients. And if you take on cool stories, your people, PR is hard work. Your people will really enjoy doing it. You'll retain people. And finally, the journalists will like hearing from you if you don't pitch them shit. So it's a very simple premise that kind of guided us. We were very, very lucky from the beginning. We've handled, I think, 25 unicorns.
I'd like to introduce myself as well.
Oh my God, well, I was going to get to that.
Hi, I'm Daphne. I'm 1/3 of the co-founders. I also did not come from a PR background, came from journalism. And after doing a decade of reporting for TV, I thought, what's my natural next step? And of course, I knew nothing about tech and nothing about PR, but here I am. And I think it just goes back to what Mike was saying. At the very heart of this is identifying a story and always asking yourselves, why should people care? You can answer the why, the how comes after, but why should people care? And that's, I think, like the North Star for all of us.
Yeah, that's kind of been the guiding principle. And you know, a big part of the companies we had access to was partnerships with VCs. That was kind of our guiding principle from the beginning. So it's been, you know, the Olive portfolio, Bessemer, Viola. Generally, our funnel comes from the venture fund. We don't have to really market. And I think
From my coaches?
I'm sorry?
What? Oh, sorry, I'm not on mute. Apologies.
All right. Yeah, so we've been really lucky to have great VC partners, StageOne as well. And I think part of the relationship is also based on telling companies when they shouldn't do PR and when PR can help. It's not for every company to hire an agency. So I think that built a lot of trust as opposed to, I think, other agencies in the industry. The portfolio is relatively mature. So meaning out of the 45 companies, we raise between $1 billion and $1.5 billion a year, our companies. I don't know what that means in this day and age with the numbers being what they are, but it was traditionally a big chunk of the money being raised in the ecosystem. I want to jump right in because we're going to be talking about a bunch of stuff, and we can't really start unless we talk about the landscape, the context where all of you guys are operating, and then we can kind of like dive into what can be done. The landscape has really, really shifted. It was a big premise of why we started the company. We saw the writing on the wall as journalists making that shift, and it's become really, really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, obviously newspapers are a relic of the past. Many people have never seen one in their lives anymore. And it's all digital all the time. But what that means is that these publishers no longer know how to make money because people aren't paying for subscriptions anymore. So what that translates into is much fewer journalists having to crank out way more content because it's a constant, beast that needs to be fed. It's not a newspaper that goes out in the morning and then your day is done and you write one more piece for the following day. Journalists are constantly cranking out content. And they're traditionally underpaid, overworked, and always hungry for smart, relevant things as long as you make their life easy.
The whole business of news kind of crumbled in the last 10, 15 years. You have to, the internet forced you to have a 24-hour news cycle and constantly have to produce more and more content. And the business model died alongside it. So you have a situation where there's a lot of pressure on the press to put out lots of stuff, but it's harder and harder as there's more, fewer and fewer journalists. So the situation essentially becomes for tech journalists
that they're writing pieces all the time. They're largely underpaid. They are not hanging out in like the cool cafes in New York and in San Francisco. They're living in suburbs, trying to make ends meet. And at the end of the day, what they want you to do is make their lives easy. Give them good stuff, well written, well thought out, newsworthy with news hooks, relevant things that their readers are going to care about because they're working really hard.
Yeah, they've got to get it by the editor. There's tons of pressure on them. Again, they're not living in San Francisco or New York because they can't afford it. Like it's become absurd. So like the whole distance of, oh, well, we're friends with journalists, we know journalists, all these kind of things. I'm going to get somebody into the room. That's become a relic of the past. Or, oh, I'm great friends with this journalist, we go out drinking together. No, they don't have time to go out drinking. And your friendship with a journalist doesn't get you coverage. It doesn't. You can get a favor maybe once from a friend. All it does is allow, if you're a good agency with great contacts, that means they're going to open the email. And if you pitch them shit, they're going to stop opening your email because it's just a waste of their time if it's not relevant. So that's really, really important kind of factor to drill in that it's bullshit. It doesn't exist. We're in this industry. It's nonsense. So when we're dealing with this many kind of journalists in the international scope.
So just to give you context, then they're getting pitched a ton, they're overworked. They need to actually have views of their work because that's how they're measured. Those are their KPIs. So they're going to often write about things that they think majority of their readers are going to care about, which means they go to the big boys. They talk about things that affect Google, Facebook, Apple, and then they talk about things that are major trends, and they'll want to show ways of how other things can fit into major trends. So, for example, however cool your startup is, if you can't find a way to answer why it matters and why it fits into a major trend, they're likely to not care about you. And so you just need to find ways to enter yourself into relevant conversations that more people are having.
Yeah, we'll soon put up a slide about the numbers of like, so you can really kind of like get a visual of what's going on and how hard it is to get into some of these outlets and appreciate it. But in general, yeah, like even a big startup, even a Wix here, that's a big player and a publicly, they grind like crazy to get into these outlets. Like it's not easy. It takes years. They're not a FANG company. They're not tied to these types of stuff. And it's really, really, really challenging. So you can't expect as a startup that you're coming out of stealth or your product launch is going to make it. It's just not realistic. It's just not realistic in this kind of environment. Really, really hard.
And generally what people are most excited about is their funding. And I mean, these are two snarky examples of Bloomberg reporters whose job it is literally to write about funding, bemoaning the fact that they just won't cover anything that is less than 100 million round. I mean,
this is old.
This is old, and it's only gotten worse. But these are two, both Ari Levy and Nico Grant are Bloomberg reporters whose job it is to cover funding. That's not to say that there aren't other outlets that cover smaller numbers. There are, and you can get your funding covered. It's just harder work than it once was. Once upon a time, a seed round, of a round, small numbers, didn't matter if you had a cool story. Like it was much easier to do. And today the landscape's really changed, especially now when there are just mega rounds that are flooding the ecosystem.
So just to give you guys an indication of what's going on. Like, so TechCrunch is writing 30 pieces a day. 23 of them are going to be about FANG companies, right? Product launches of the major tech players, what this means, their announcements. Then you've got a couple of, the Y Combinator's Silicon Valley darling type things, or the ex-founders of, right? He had Evernote, now he's launching a new video chat, whatever the fuck it is. And they're going to take up a little bit of space, and then you're fighting for the rest. That's what's going on in to get traction in TechCrunch. So, and they'll generally gravitate towards funding, and they'll generally gravitate towards big funding, unless you have a super sexy space. But again, the problem is it's a lot of luck. Meaning, if you reach out to Ingrid with a funding announcement of even 50, and she's busy that day because her kid is sick, or she's had a long day, or had a fight with her husband, or God knows what, and she doesn't cover it. It's not like somebody's going to call her editor the next day and say, how did you miss that 50 from, I don't know, who announced 50, Placer AI yesterday? How did you miss that? She's not going to get fired because there's 14 other rounds that are bigger than that going on. So again, it's just to kind of like understand the context of what you're up against in terms of coverage. All right, so it's no stam that I chose this slide because I hold PR in such high regard with the caveman slide. We've had a pretty successful agency that's outperformed most of the top tier US agencies. And before I, was able to get a kind of a cocky big head about it, I took a look around and we realized pretty quickly that we weren't that clever. It was most of the other agencies weren't very good anywhere, not in the US, long-term, short-term. We just didn't see that many. Unfortunately, there's a very low barrier to entry in PR. And it's made the industry a little bit weak. And I do think that there's a lot of great things about PR that I'll get to, but here are the challenges that you guys should be aware of right out of the gate. And you should understand. So the first thing is good PR is expensive. Guys, it's the simplest business model, my model, everybody's model. You're buying time, right? We're like lawyers or accountants or any kind of service business. So meaning, if you're buying a big team that's going to pound lots of hours with a senior member, a middle member, and a junior member that's putting in a ton of hours, it's going to cost. It's going to cost a lot of money, right? An agency works on like, at best, 20 to 25% margin with, so it's the cost of those three people and the overhead and then the margin. Simple model. Like it really is the simplest thing. But you guys have to be aware that it's not magic, meaning this is the way it works. And then you have to be aware that like, if you have less people, you could pay an agency $15,000 and they can do a great job a month. And that same agency could service you for $5,000, but you're not going to get the same results because it's a junior member without a senior team putting less hours. They can scope down the hours and they can make the same amount of profit. You're going to be disappointed with the results, but that's the way the industry works. So it's a basta because it is expensive as like a starting out of the gate. Second thing is, I don't care what anybody says, if any PR firm guarantees you results, run for the hills. There's no such thing. There's just too many variables that are out of your control, meaning you do have a $100 million announcement, major player, whatever. If somebody's got a bigger announcement than you that bumps you, it bumps you. It's not anything the PR firm can do. If they pitched it the right way and they've done all the right things, that's just the way news operates. What agencies do is they take a good look at the story and what you guys have to do an assessment of what the KPIs should be in the first 6 months, second 6 months, how to build it out, and try to align around that. That's the best practice. For you guys, ask to see similar clients that are in the space, clients that you know what they've gotten, not what they get now, but what they got when they were your size. How long have they, invested in it? So these are kind of things you have to do. But anybody who says, guaranteed results is really full of shit. Like you don't know. We can come out of the gate strong and hot and get lucky, or it's a buildup over time. Measurement also doesn't exist. There's all kinds of platforms now that track things, sentiment. 100 years ago, they used to measure literally the ink on the page from the cut the votes, but it doesn't, there's no really great way to measure success. It's all about, what your target is and what it trains. Do you know? Yeah, if it's good, if you're hitting, the right outlets, and we'll talk about how to measure and what you should be aspiring to do. But it really, really, really is impossible to measure success. And it's really, really hard in a marketing environment, especially in Israel, where we measure everything. We talked a little bit about this. Not all PR practitioners are created equal. I love this slide about the PR professional-ish that went, tweeted this out before she got on the plane to Africa. By the time she landed, obviously she was fired. But yeah, we see a lot of, a lot of crappy agencies, even ones that have done good work. So my number one piece of advice is speak to your colleagues in the ecosystem, speak to your VCs, speak to people, reach out. People will give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about everybody. And by the way, no agency is perfect. Like some agencies are great at one thing and shitty at another thing. Nobody has all the tricks. It all depends on what you need. And finally, if you take anything away from this today, before we finish this kind of part of it, there's no shortcuts to being, for PR. It's a marathon. By the simple premise that no company is made by one announcement. So if you guys had a funding announcement that didn't go well, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world. The nature of this is you have to build up an awareness over time. And by the way, it's not just for PR, it's for marketing in general. And I know the pressures that are on you guys these days with having to scale so quickly because of all the money at seed, at A, and having to run. But ultimately, guys, it is a marathon. At Lemonade, we worked for months behind the scenes before we got them traction. Months. And there's also, how long you've been working? They announced it 2 weeks ago. How long you've been working? 8 months on messaging, on this. Companies that, constantly have to pitch. It's about creating a drumbeat. So even like your big announcement, like if you look at it and you come in with a funding announcement, you hire an agency to do it. You can't just look at the results of that announcement. You want to see that announcement almost like shooting billiards, right? You want to use that announcement to think about, okay, let's not just look at it as a tactic. Let's make a strategy here. Let's think about what are 3 or 4 conversations I need to be a part of moving forward, and use the funding announcement to set that forward, right? So even if the funding announcement gets covered, then you can follow up with those journalists and own those conversations with other tactics. Or if it doesn't go so well, at least the journalists saw it. And then when you follow up with them, they connect the dots and you can move on. But this is why like one-off campaigns, like if you miss, you can miss on a funding announcement, but if you go over time and your story is good, you're going to break through. If you just pitch, you're going to break through, because as the journalists get to know you and see that it's a company in motion, it's going to come through.
I also just want to add that I think there's a pressure to announce or get out of the gate really quickly. And it sounds like a lot of what you guys are doing is quite technical. And I urge you to take time and think about answering the question, why? Why does it matter? Why should readers care about it? Why should journalists care about it? And I think we're inclined, certainly in Israel, to focus on how we're going to do it and why our technology is the best. And I think actually from a journalist perspective, it's why. So we really need to I really urge you to take time before you run out to the media and just think about what your stories are. What are the relevant issues? What are the hot button issues that are being discussed now, and where do you fit in them? How are you different than your competitors, as opposed to saying we don't have any competitors? How are you different? I mean, all these things should be carved out and thought about and sort of organized and structured before you run out of the gate.
Totally. So now that we completely shut on the whole industry of PR, there's still nothing better. Like in terms of marketing, you know, when it pops, PR is the game changer. And it's probably why we still like the industry, the rush you can have. It really is a transformative property, more than any other marketing activity. In terms of valuation funding, especially what's going on now, it's the biggest factor. We're seeing that, like, if you get out of the gate and do something well, you get speaking opportunities, you get award opportunities. Like, it kind of lubricates the whole movement, and it allows everything to work well. Sales, marketing, partnerships, all these things kind of run better when it's happening. It really, really does make a massive, massive impact. And it's, you know, for us, it's fun to be a part of that.
And I think coverage begets coverage.
Yeah.
And I think actually this weird, like, traumatic year and a half that we've been all going through, I think really cements what Bill Gates was saying here, that, like, you know, lots of companies were sort of thrust into turmoil. They did not know how they were going to, you know, do sales or go to marketing events. And actually the only thing that they could do to sort of bolster their brand was try to interact with the media and keep a PR strategy alive. So it was a privilege to be able to help some of those companies, and just, it really is a way to keep yourself front and center and relevant, even when, you know, the world's crumbling around us.
So in terms of the situation now, I think it just kind of highlights what Daphne was saying about COVID, where you have a situation now where there's so much money floating around, and, you know, money doesn't come without a string. And there's a lot more, you know, the big conversations in the ecosystem is, okay, Israel's done really great at building companies and selling them. We all want to scale up now. How do we do it? Do we have the resources? Do we have the marketing infrastructure? How do we build this, you know, fast enough to, do we have the skills to really build monsters out of here? In terms of Israel, do the VCs give us enough guidance? Sorry, StageOne. Do, you know what I mean? Are we essentially just a bunch of CTO founders that don't have business chops? We just know how to build this. There's a lot of questions and a lot of pressure on companies to scale up. We're seeing, I think we're going through 6 SPACs right now, and 2 IPOs. No, it's not 2 IPOs. Going through a number of these IPOs, and yeah, the companies are all of a sudden rushing to have to get their marketing house in order. It takes a year to build a marketing operation minimum, and the same thing with PR. So everyone's having to start a little bit earlier. And that leads to the question, how do you generate coverage when you don't have funding or major VC backing? If you don't have a product, product's not cooked. It happens a lot. Or some kind of demo. You don't have clients to leverage for case studies. You don't have partnerships. Like, you don't have much in the bag. And yet, you know, in the past, and Yael can attest to this and certainly tell, I would tell companies, don't do anything. Just sit back, you know what I mean? Do some stuff on your own, but there's no pressure on you to do this in the A round. Unfortunately, the market has shifted. Like, you have to start early now, and you have to try to own parts of conversations. So I think we're going to talk about a couple of things that you guys can do to kind of make it better, and position yourselves to do this on your own, and get started and actually do this pretty effectively. First thing is consume. I speak to so many founders, and I even speak to marketers. They don't read their industry outlets. They're not tracking what's going on. And it's arguably the most important, you know, they say this about intelligence, right? I'm sure a lot of you guys were in intelligence students. All the intelligence comes from newspapers. Like, it is a big, big part of the deal. You have to know what your competitors are doing, what the 10 or 15 journalists that specifically write about what you do are writing about, what are the trends, what are they interested in. That is going to give you an indication of how to position yourself, how to position your story, how to build it, and understand what's happening. What's the tone of the conversations going on? Guys, it's not a lot. It's a Google News search.
Yeah, I mean, it's really as simple as creating a Google alert that pings you anytime any of your keywords or your competitors' names emerge in the news. And I'll tell you something, the other reason it's really critical is also because of sentiment, meaning for a while, journalists are really hot for something, and then at some point their impression of it or their opinion of it could shift or change. And if you're, like, just interacting with them in a static way, you can really miss out or miss the bigger story or set yourself up to fail. So, like, just stay on top of it. Google alert your name, your few keywords, your few competitors, and just take an
Yeah.
hour.
It's not that difficult. So the first thing I would say is consume. Marketers should definitely be doing it. Converse. This doesn't mean pitch, meaning get on the radar, but not by being a pest and being like an annoying, pushy, pitchy type thing. Again, they're not making much money. Like part of the only cool thing about being a journalist is that people kind of like kiss your ass a little bit. Let them know that, you know, and especially when you're a tech journalist, you've got this, you know, feeling that you just want that adoration or somebody. If you know, track these journalists and write to them, hey, really smart piece, I work in the space. This is what we're seeing as well. I'm really enjoying reading your stuff. You're going to build a rapport with these people. They're not superstars that are going to shit on you, or they're going to appreciate it. And I think it's so important.
I'm actually going to like push it one step further. If you are following, like you identify 5-6 reporters that you think are really important to you, you follow them on Twitter or LinkedIn. And I think what's really important to them is for you to say something, like to give them feedback. And I don't mean like critique their piece, but say, that's really interesting perspective, but actually have you thought about this? Or, you know, I actually see it from a different perspective. I think this could be very useful. Engage in conversation, literally converse, engage in conversation, push it forward.
But don't pitch, you know what I mean? You're building a relationship, you're not pitching. And I think the same thing, you know, this kind of speaks to what we're talking about. They need your numbers, share it, they need it. Like that's what they're being measured by. So they won't forget it. Okay. So I think that there's two major things that you can do essentially when you don't have news yet, and there's not much in the pipeline in terms of getting traction and working other tactics that you will down the line. But things that can be done on your own, and I know it's time consuming, and by the way, the same thing is, to me, there's no excuse for not consuming press in your space, even if you're a busy founder and knee deep in technology. You should be doing it either way. But these are two things that I think that you guys should definitely have top in mind that work, that will get you traction. So the first thing is something I'm very passionate about is data. Data, it's the first question I ask any company that comes in. Do you have any data? Do you have any data? Like, this is a ready-made, we call it journalist crack. This is a ready-made story. This is a ready-made positioning play. If you have data insights at your disposal about trends that are going on in the market, in your space, you can leverage that and essentially live off that. Create a data, you know, your marketing plan can all be built around a data producing program where you put out a report every few months and you don't need to do PR outreach. This will get you where you need to go. So again, it's finding, you know, counterintuitive numbers and insights with the numbers to back it. It's a ready-made story for a journalist. They will always write about it. So you could get 6, 7, I've seen as much as 20 or 30 placements. Oh God, what was that company that essentially got bought off a data report? Roy. Oh my God, it's gonna torture me. It'll come to me later. It was the one that fixed his computer, that did a data report comparing laptops. I can't remember, it was like 5-6 years ago. And essentially they did a data report on that and it literally got the company bought. The same thing is here. Like the beauty of it is you get coverage and then the journalists come back to you. Every time they write about that topic and they do research, they're gonna come across your numbers and they're gonna quote them again. And then when they're writing another piece, they're gonna come back and ask you for more numbers. And it's just a never-ending gift. It is the best thing that you can invest in terms of, you know, generating a PR machine on your own. It's also like, it's value driven, like meaning you're giving value to the journalist, to the reader, to everybody else. So I think it's one of the most important things you can do and should like build your marketing around that from the beginning.
It also, it creates relationships, meaning the first time you send out some data to reporters, they will be interested or they won't be interested. From there on in though, is they're going to start reaching out to you to see if you have other nuggets of data that could serve them well. So there's something really powerful in data generated relationships. Now, not all of you have data that you can access easily, but the truth is you can also create data reports using Google surveys, meaning it costs money, but you can reverse engineer what you think could be potential headlines in your space and ask the very pointed questions with the aim of getting to the headline that will be of interest to reporters in your space. So you need to think about it from who your target audience is and build reports or build questions that result in counterintuitive answers. Meaning, if you're just going to say that, we found that 80% of people like, perks at work, then nobody's going to, there's no one who actually doesn't like perks at work. So
Right.
You need to build reports out or build surveys or studies or data reports that actually say something interesting. But it's, as Mike said, it's crap for the reporters.
Yeah, and it's easy to promote. And by the way, if you're looking for numbers, like government websites, labor statistics, there's tons of numbers out there that you can leverage to take on. And again, 1,000 person, like even a Google poll that ends up talking to 1,000 people, that's more than enough for a journalist to run. It's not that hard to put together. And as Daphne diplomatically said, you could essentially position the outcome by crafting questions, reverse engineering it and crafting questions in the right way. It's a really, really great tool to use. And I think one of the great things is before we jump into contributed content, you can also parse that data in other ways, right? You can take the insights and then build it into a thought leadership piece, but we'll talk about that in a sec. Thought leadership, contributed content.
So it's something else that you can do on your own, meaning you can build out a plan of content that allows you to strengthen your brand in a really strategic way. You can think about areas that you can provide value in. You can talk about experiences you've had that can teach others and inspire others. And it's a really, it's a gift that keeps on giving because it can really support your brand when you have no news.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. You can actually use, like, if you just live off the data and the thought leadership writing, you can actually take a strong market leadership position in a number of spaces, especially in deep tech. Like, it's unbelievable how the opportunities are there just on that without an agency and just doing it in-house. Yeah, Daphne and I probably have opposing thoughts on what thought leadership is. I'll let Daphne say hers and then mine's a little more aggressive.
I think thought leadership is a piece of content that has the reader in mind, meaning you need to say something that is interesting, you need to say something that is thought-provoking, you need to say something that people will learn something from. And the most important thing is it absolutely cannot be self-promotional, meaning if you present a problem that you are the solution for, that is not thought leadership. The other piece of feedback we got once back from Mo at VentureBeat was, there is no one in the world that will take the counter position that it is not interesting. If you are building an argument against something that no one is going to be in opposition to, then it is not thought leadership. So you need to bear that in mind, that thought leadership at the heart of it has to bring value to somebody else other than yourself. So yes, what isn't? Presenting a problem that only you can solve. Writing about yourself to uplift who you are as opposed to uplifting your reader. And at the end of the day, you should be teaching readers something new. They should be learning from your experiences, or there should be some sort of transformational thing that the reader is receiving as a result of the content.
I'm going to go more aggressive.
You don't say.
To dovetail off what Mo said about what she said about counterintuitive, like if there's not a counter argument. Yes, your job, you're not an academic. You're not, I know it's a thought leadership piece. You don't want to be looked at as somebody who's an asshole and only taking a one-way position. But the truth of the matter is, it's not an academic piece. I don't want to read it and say from this perspective and on this hand, but there's no, for the architecture person, the accelerator company that was here, GPUs versus CPUs, and is it a hardware solution or a software solution, and what's going to give us the ability to scale up our data analysis. I want you to take a position and say why this is going to be the wave of the future. That GPU accelerators or whatever it is, or whether it's edge in the cloud or an edge, this is going to be the way, and this is why. I don't want to, that's what they want to hear. You're not there to convince to be the nice guy or that. You're there to take a position. You can do it in a classy way or whatever, but take a position. That's what makes true thought leadership, laying out the vision for what's going to be.
Actually, and I want to even just say something, meaning take a definitive position and say something. And then you need to commit to it, and you need to decide if you have a budget, if this is something you want to pay, do you want to pay for to for the publication of content, or are you going to be aggressive about trying to get things placed in different outlets? But really, I'm going to encourage you to say something. And so, like, the next slide is about think. And I'm really, it sounds stupid, but you need to take time to think about what people are talking about, what's new that can be said in your industry, what is something you read that really pissed you off, and you were sitting around a conversation at your conference table and you guys were all arguing about it. That is the fodder for good content.
Yeah, there's no shortage of arguments around, we're Israelis, we argue about everything. It's generally on point, but they're these are the things you have to be digging into. And by the way, as Daphne mentioned, with think about what's the conversations that are going on in your industry. If you don't consume your press, you're not going to know. You're going to be tone deaf. So if you're in AI, one of you guys said, was talking about the workforce and handling AI. So you should be talking about AI bias and gender and race and all these things. These are the discussions that are going on in your space. Leverage that, take a position and knock the shit out of it.
I'm going to give you some really tactless advice here. So, in order to get thought leadership placed, first of all, you have to sort of do some research and figure out who the editors are that decide which thought leadership goes in and which thought leadership gets passed on. And you need to know the outlet, which goes back to consuming content, meaning you need to make sure you're pitching the right idea to the right outlet. But at the end of the day, you need to understand that it's a process. And so you need to write a pitch, send it, and then it takes a couple of days to get response, pass or interest or excitement. But you need to do it one outlet at a time. And actually, the most important piece of advice I can give you about writing a pitch is actually the subject line in the email, because they get pitched ad nauseum. They get so many pitches a day, and we can't even begin to tell you the amount of data we've seen about the fact that the subject line is what determines whether they click open your email or they don't. And so if you are doing a pitch about the workplace or about, anything, you need to find a sassy sentence to put in the subject line, because that is what's going to get them to open it. And then you need to write, a 5-sentence email. That's it, saying this is the idea, this is your thesis statement, this is why you think it's good for their readers, and set to. And again, they say yes, they're excited. I'm going to urge you to take the time to really think about the structure of how you write, because it's got to be a very clear thesis, a very clear position, and then it's got to be built and proven with anecdotes, with data, with anything that's going to grab readers by attention, and has to be really well thought out, well written, and well constructed. Because the number one reason that editors give for rejecting content is that it's low quality, that it hasn't been written well enough, that it's not interesting enough, that there is a gap between the pitch and the piece. I mean, you really need to take the time to invest in it, because at the end of the day, the quality of the writing and the alignment between pitch and piece are critical to editors.
In terms of outlets?
Here you go. Here are some outlets that accept thought leadership. Forbes, for example, has a paid opportunity as well as a editorial opportunity, meaning Forbes, they have councils that you can pay into and then publish a piece once a month. Entrepreneur does as well. The rest of these outlets are, just look for content and are willing to accept thought leadership pieces penned by entrepreneurs. Inc. has requirements. They ask you to commit to 30 pieces or something ridiculous. But all of these outlets are good homes for pieces. And I just want to point out in the corner, value your trade. I mean, I know Forbes is a sexy title, but at the end of the day, your key audiences might be reading your trades more than they're reading Forbes. And I can guarantee your trades are desperate for content. So, you might want to moonshot and aim for CNBC, but it's certainly very valuable to also look at the much more niche verticals that are covering your area specifically.
And the content will reflect that, right? If you're writing for cyber trades and you're super, you're writing for CISOs, then obviously, the trade publications, you're going to use different language and you can really, really zero in or you can dumb it down for the investor community. Again, no offense to StageOne. And when you're targeting the other outlets, you can broaden the story and zoom out and tie it, you know, where you see the wider trends going, and obviously how you guys fit into it in a non, you know, pushy way, but it's kind of positioning a kind of a vision thing, and that's what investors love to see. But they still like to see the trades as well, but that's like going to get exposure with, you know, the venture funds when they see you, because the venture funds, of course, send that onwards to their LPs, I would imagine.
But all is not lost. You know, you're going to get rejected sometimes. You're going to have a piece that you think is brilliant, well written, you love it, you're proud of it. And all is not lost if it doesn't get placed. That's where Medium and LinkedIn fit in. And these are great free places to post your wisdom. But it needs to be amplified by marketing, meaning you need to really aggressively share and promote it and send it around to see, so that people that you care about in your space see it and read it and start to follow you. So just, I don't want to preach, but just in terms of your checklist for whether your thought leadership is interesting and whether it is actually thought leadership as opposed to self-promotional advertising or an advertorial, these are your checklists. Like, you should ask yourself, or you know what, don't ask yourself, ask a friend to read your piece and ask them, is it relevant? Is it provocative? Does it challenge the normal opinion or the most obvious opinion? Is it forward-looking? Am I taking a story and am I taking it further? Is it unique? Is it inspiring? At the end of the day, these are the top things that you need to focus on. And I would just also add, make sure that the tone of the piece represents the tone of the company. Meaning, if you're a really optimistic company, then having, you know, a sarcastic piece that rips apart your competitors probably isn't in line with your brand. So just make sure that it all sort of strengthens your brand, and your brand should strengthen your company's brand.
Yeah, give it some thought. Again, the messaging and where you want to be as a result of this, because this is going to lead to the speaking opportunities and all these other things. So you really is the most visible part of your brand.
And do it.
Pitch.
And don't let a no get you down. Like, keep going. If one outlet says no, go to the next outlet. If the next outlet says no, it does not mean it's a bad piece. It just means maybe it's not in line with where they're at right that second, or maybe they have a tremendously long queue because everyone's pitching right now. So just keep going. And again, I want to encourage you that one piece of thought leadership does not a thought leadership strategy make. You should be cranking them out, like, if not once a month, once every 2 months. You should be really making sure to, like, get your brand out there.
It's not going to go to waste, because if it doesn't go there, then it'll go to Medium. If it doesn't go on Medium, it'll go on your blog. There's always something to do with a nugget of a good idea, right? You can parse it in different ways and use it. And ends up, I see, you know, parts of thought leadership stuff end up in sales copy, marketing copy, email copy. Like, it always goes somewhere. So invest in it. It's not going to go to waste.
You also don't know where it's going to end up. Like, there's a really great sort of story. I'm going to leave the company's name out, but this CEO shared with us that his company got acquired because the company acquiring saw a piece in Entrepreneur about how he uses his flight time like how being, you know, an overseas entrepreneur has really maximized his productivity because he uses his flight time up. And yeah, it's bullshit. Right?
I'm not embarrassed to see who it is. It's Reality Mon. It's Dynamic Yield got bought by McDonald's as a result of that. We've been working with them for 7 years. That's the piece that got him bought. None of it makes sense. You don't know where it's going to come from. We have like 100 absurd stories like that.
So it always will provide value. You're not always sure, the value isn't always linear. So I really encourage you to do it and to continue doing it and continue doing it and continue doing it. Exactly. And share and tweet and be aggressive about, you know, putting yourselves out there, because first of all, the entire social media ecosystem is built on reciprocity. So you need to like and comment on other people, and then encourage them to like and comment on you, and then you need to share and tweet out and interact. So it's all about reciprocity, and you need to be active there as well.
Kind of dovetails with the next thing.
Right. And the last thing I want to say is there are some, you know, marketing and PR mesh really beautifully. And I think PR is a really wonderful tool for marketing. And I think sometimes we think they are one and the same, but they aren't. Because marketing has a really specific purpose, and that is to speak to customers, to speak to potential customers. And PR has many different audiences or stakeholders. And so we need to speak differently to the different stakeholders without always selling in a very direct way, because the main differentiator is that we have a journalist in the middle, meaning every time we interact with a stakeholder or we try to preserve or enhance your brand with a different audience, in the middle of that interaction is someone who wants statistics to prove our points, who wants data to understand the foundation, who wants us to, have the academic sort of link to prove what it is that we are saying. So marketing is speaking directly to customers, and PR is speaking to a different public, is sometimes speaking to the same public, but sometimes speaking to different publics with that journalist in the middle. So,
and yet the PR needs the marketing to give it wings, right? Like you can't just depend on the eyeballs you get from a piece anywhere else. That's when marketing steps in and gives it a 10x boost, right? And promotes it everywhere and pushes it out through Outbrain or whatever platforms they want to use. So they are kind of going together, but the main point is like the messaging is different. Like we work a lot with some of the big branding agencies. That's when we kind of get brought in at the tail end of that. And sometimes I want to cringe, and there's some wonderful branding agencies in Israel actually, but I want to cringe when like the taglines and everything is like, it's so not, it doesn't pass the smell test. It sounds great and it makes them feel sexy and cool, whatever, but I can't pitch that to a journalist. They're gonna fucking laugh at me. Like they're not, you know what I mean? They're not gonna buy that line and that boilerplate that the branding agency. So I think that the companies have been really good about saying, okay, or the branding agencies actually as well, about bringing in saying, okay, there's a different stakeholder with the press, so let's tweak the messaging so it can kind of pass.
Right. I think, your brand develops credibility when you don't always go to like the language of the best, the biggest, the most, the first. I mean, you need to build credibility by having insight and intelligent commentary.
Takeaway, guys, really for the most part is it ain't brain surgery. You can do it. Yes, it's time consuming, it's annoying, and it's all this stuff. I get it, but it's totally doable to kind of like focus on just kind of understanding your space and who's operating in it and super targeting and creating these kind of things. Just data and thought leadership is enough to kind of carry you without having to bring on an agency, because it's not just the cost of an agency, it's managing them. It's annoying as hell, and it's like there's a lot of aspects to it. A year ago, I would have told you, don't even bother starting yet if you're super early stage. But if it's, but these days, you can't afford to wait. You've got to get moving on it as early as possible. It's not, you can't wait till like raising the A round. You got to start, or till you hire that kick-ass marketer. You can't do it. You got to start moving early, because everybody's owning these conversations, even if they've got nothing under the hood. They're getting involved in these conversations. There's no reason why you can't, and there's too much at stake in terms of the valuation and the positioning in market. You just don't want to get outplayed. I've seen so many better technologies just sitting on their ass and fiddling with the tech while a shittier player owns the market. So I don't know if that was inspiring.
It was very inspiring. Thanks very much. I think it was very insightful. Before, I actually have a bunch of questions which I think would be useful for the companies, but I do want to know if anyone from our portfolio companies have questions or pain points they want to discuss, and use it, because they have a lot of experience and I think they can give you great insights. So
Sure, I'll take a shot. This is Jody with Autonomo. I'm finding that there's the professional reporters that we need to be talking to, but then there's all the, I don't know if you want to call it reportage, but all of the bloggers and influencers that we're also dealing with that don't have the same rules necessarily as reporters have, but they're critical for us. Especially like we're at the stage of de-SPACing. So, when we're talking to investors, we want to be also talking to, bloggers in the investor community. How do you suggest dealing with that, the non-professional reporting world?
I think I would suggest 3 things. One is know what you want to say. 2, know what you don't want to say. And absolutely hyper prepare for nightmare questions. Meaning, we all have Achilles heels to either our technology or to our financial structures or to anything. Like everyone has an Achilles heel. And the number one solution to all of this is through messaging. So know what for example, know what you're selling in that interaction with that blogger. You have 2 key messages, not 22, and you're just gonna stay there and you're gonna prove them and you're gonna give anecdotes and analogies and whatever is appropriate for that particular person. Be prepared for what you think is the worst question they can ask you, because chances are they're gonna ask it. And you know, the best tool you have in a difficult situation is you need to answer the question, you need to bridge, and then you need to go to your message. You need to tell them something that's really interesting and exciting and sexy, because that is your key message. So I just say hyper focus on what it is you want to sell to them. Understand that it's, you know, an interaction. They're going to ask you also tough questions. Be prepared. I mean, write out your nightmare questions, write out your nightmare the answers to elegantly handle them, addressing them, and then moving back to where it is that you want to be in the conversation.
And short, bridge, and back to your key message. With Autonomo, obviously, once you're starting to deal with the investor community, obviously it's all about, you know, with the traditionals, you really want to focus on, you know, that blue ocean message, right? Data is the new oil, whatever the hell they're using these days. Like, this is just beginning, and really kind of like dazzling them with you're not talking tech anymore. Once you're at your stage, you're talking to investors, and that's all about, this is a blue ocean opportunity, right? So if it's Wix, it's less than 1% of companies have websites. Oh my God, as an investor, right? It's getting away from the tech and more about stuff that they can touch and feel and see how big this market is.
I think even before talking with investors, I found that if I really wanted to hook a reporter, I usually had to talk about the business value and where I'm going to move the needle. Where's the impact? You know, because, you know, they want the human part of the story. Talking about Port 180 isn't going to make anybody excited.
Exactly.
Like, it's not going to work. And the other thing to go back about staying on message and answering the questions that you want to answer.
Answering the question and then continuing to speak to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, my daughter.
Not answering the question is the BB move, right? Zot lo ha'she'ela. Ha'she'ela hi, and then asking yourself a question and answering it.
Okay, we're gonna let Jody. I actually just wanted to discuss, and it's actually important that I'm asking it now because it may be relevant to a few of our companies. I think as someone who's done marketing and PR for 10 years in startups and now looking on the other side, I think especially in Israel, there's a lot of a gap between English and Hebrew, and CEOs finding it hard to write. We're much more technical people. We're not as, you know, as I would say not a lot of us are great content writers either, which is fine. So how do they focus on that, number one? And number two, I mean, I think thought leadership can also not necessarily only be the CEO. It can come from other people in the company. It can be the head of product. It can even be, I don't know, the head of sales, and try and write thought leadership pieces around those aspects as well. That's something that I also believe in, and I would love to hear your thing. And last point is when, because marketing and PR, although they come together hand in hand, as most people say, when companies need to hire their first marketer, okay, should they look like really for someone who comes from a PR background, comes from a product background, because again, they still have to have someone who knows how to do these thought leadership pieces and approach the press, but, you know, also do product. And it's always a question that repeats itself all the time. So those were my 3 points.
So in terms of, I just want to address the first thing in regards to like thought leadership. This was a hot argument we had on some platform. I was speaking on a panel with somebody from AppsFlyer, and AppsFlyer is a long-term client, like years and all that. And they were saying, oh, you know, it's so great. We use multiple channels for our thought leadership program. We're using so many different people in the company. It builds up morale and all this and all that, and going on and on and on and on. And I kind of called bullshit on it. And I don't know if I was right, but I took a position. I was like, your CEO and founder is an incredible guy, but he's not a thought leader. And their competitor has an incredible thought leader, and you're skirting that issue by going wide. And maybe that's the best play there is. I don't know. I'd be interested to know what Daphne thinks about it, because I think there's no substitute for the founder, especially when we're talking about an era of, guys, VCs are looking for founder market fit. They're not even looking at product market fit. Like, this is what we're hearing from Bessemer, like from a lot of the bigger VCs in the States. Like, that is, and I'm sure you're hearing it as well at StageOne and all these places, that it's now about founder market fit. We're not looking at seed A, whatever. We're looking at that, how we are going to present these founders to the investors to sell that, blue ocean message that they have to, move it on to the next level. And I think it's really difficult if you don't build up your founder. Like, that should be first and foremost on the agenda today in this environment.
I completely agree. Meaning, I think there is room to get content from other departments, and there is room to go into other verticals when you have an expansive content department. But initially, the CEO is the product, is the brand, and the brand is the CEO. And I think to dilute that is a mistake initially. So initially, even if the CEO isn't the person writing, he or she can have somebody else write it, do the work. They need to obviously reflect their opinions. I mean, there is nothing actually better than to have the conversation with the CEO, have her or him explain or articulate what they're passionate about, what they read yesterday that pissed them off because it's bullshit, or have their insights. But the piece should build the CEO initially. As your company grows, then I don't know, then you should use whoever you have in order to have that company's name. Like, there was one of my favorite pieces we ever wrote was for an ad tech company who actually the doctor of data was actually a dad. So they were talking about the conflict they're in between, on the one hand, selling the importance of ads in order to keep internet free, but on the other hand, their children being the recipients of those ads and how that makes them feel, and privacy and all that stuff. So you can always find something that's very human, but I think that's down the road. Initially, it should be the founders that are put front and center.
And of course, you talk about the second point, I think, touches to talent and the struggle in the ecosystem with marketing talent. And it's across the board, right? Marketing, PR, but most of the demand is for marketing talent. And this is another fucking hot topic that everybody's arguing about. Like, where does the problem start? Do we have enough marketing talent here? Probably not. Like Anglo marketing talent, or even Israeli, and we don't have enough talent in the ecosystem. Do we have enough developers in the ecosystem? No. Do they have enough marketers in San Francisco? No. It's like the same problem in every hyper growth place. And yeah, I think that we haven't done a good enough job leveraging, first of all, a lot of the Israeli marketing ecosystem that are marketers that were in consumer or in non-tech stuff. We got to bring them in, man. Like, they haven't been moved over to tech yet. And I think that there's a lot of knowledge that's been left on the table there. And I think they're waiting to kind of get brought in. Tech is a very insular place, right? You need somebody to bring you in. So I think that that's a problem. And then I have another problem, and here I've placed it solely on the founders and partially on the VCs. Founders demand experienced marketers. Well, to you founders who I love and whatever, with all due respect, many of you are not experienced CEOs, and somebody gave you money and gave you a shot. Find smart people and build them into marketers. Let them run and learn and make mistakes and fall and scrap their knees and fuck it up. Like, they're going to get 9 things wrong. And if they get 1 right, you're doing great as a marketer if you hit 1 out of 10 things. Like, I think that there's a belief here, and this is, again, it's not, this is an ongoing conversation in the marketing ecosystem of, nobody wants to grow talent. Everybody's saying, oh, I'm stuck. I can't find a growth marketer. Yeah, it sucks. Find a great, somebody who's had a marketing manager position, give them a director and give them a shot. Give them a shot. Hire smart. Like, there's tons of smart people, but give them a shot to learn. I know it sounds scary, but you guys didn't know what you were doing at the beginning. You didn't know how to run a company or build a product or whatnot. So it should be expanded. And I think that that's something we all have to learn it. We're all building this together. So I think that that's the big issue. Yeah, agencies are great places to look for people, not ours, but others.
And the whole Hebrew English aspect, especially for founders, that we see it all. I mean, I see it, and from years of experience, I see it all the time. I always say that I don't think founders need to be scared. I don't think because everyone's writing content today, it doesn't have to be perfect. No one has to have an English education or have gone, studied English in university. But I think that there's this barrier that the Israeli founders need to pass, that it's okay to write in English. It's okay to write their thought pieces in English. And even if they're not like amazing, grammar wise, and there are things, of course, they have to be quite.
Writing is the easiest thing to fix.
Right, that's exactly.
Oh my God, have big ideas. The writing will, you can.
You buy a writing for a nickel at the corner store, you can find somebody to clean up your English.
Wait, let me tell you, something. A friend of mine just told me that she turned down a writing gig with a really big outlet, like Financial Times. I'm getting, why? Because they were paying her $250 to write a piece. So please believe me, if you're working on a piece of content and you need a really good writer, there are so many frustrated externalists that will make it dance. Have a big idea, they'll make it dance.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else from our companies that want to ask? This is your time. Guys, next time we're doing it face to face, and then you're all going to have to ask. You don't have a choice.
It's going to be real awkward then.
No, we'll just get them drunk.
Yeah. A few drinks, the questions fly. Which is the shittiest client? Who has no technology but great PR? We get into stuff too after a few.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for the session. I think it was great. I think a lot of useful information. I think you give us a lot of useful information to all the companies. I would be happy if the presentation, if I could give it to them. If you don't mind, I'm also going to write like a little article about it, and I'll share it with everyone. And any last words from you guys?
Guys, StageOne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Guys, just before you go, StageOne is like extended family. Like if you guys have any questions about anything, you want to have something by us, reach out to us, yell, connect us. We're happy to help you with anything. It's part of what we do here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.